Okay, we are
Yes,
live.
we are live.
Okay, I'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. Teresa, can you take the roll call, please?
Absolutely. Trustee Virgo,
Here.
trustee Wilson, trustee Pandolfi,
Here.
trustee Stepp,
Here.
trustee Weiss, trustee Wyckoff, trustee Thies.
Yes.
We have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. I believe the next step up is to approve the agenda, or is it the consent agenda?
Yes, the agenda. It's
The agenda. Okay, I have a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Oh, second, this is Yummy.
Thank you, Yemi. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay. Teresa, can you take the vote, please? The roll?
Trustee Pandolfi,
Aye.
trustee Stepp,
Aye.
trustee Virgo,
Aye.
trustee Thies,
Yes.
motion carries.
Okay, thank you. Next up would be, I think, approval of the minutes.
They're from November 2024.
Thank you. If you guys need a second to take a look at it, you can do that too. Or I'll accept the motion to approve the minutes.
We have a motion. Ron did Ron.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a second?
This is Noel, I second.
Thank you. Any discussion, questions? Okay. Then we'll take the vote, please. Take the roll call.
Trustee Pandolfi,
Aye.
trustee Stepp,
Aye.
trustee Virgo,
Aye.
trustee Thies,
Yes.
motion carries.
Okay. Next up is the 2024-2025 budget. And at this point, I'll turn it over to Aaron.
Okay, thank you, trustee Virgo.
Thank you.
Today we will present our personnel budget for the next fiscal year. As we discussed in our budget session earlier or last month, you'll see our priorities outlined in investment and operational support such as finance, IT, and legal. Also an increased investment in growth areas such as digital innovation and digitization efforts. And most importantly, the prioritization of a commitment to competitive pay for our baseline employees and others throughout the organization. So now we'll get into the fun part of the details of our personnel budget. And I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer Ridley, the Director of HR.
Hi, everybody, this is Jennifer. We're gonna, on our screens, we're gonna have the presentation, but if you're in the room here, then you have a copy of the budget in front of you. There's also the numbers of the budget. That's also on board docs, as well as in board docs, there's also a supplemental data packet with additional detailed information that was used to create the estimates in this budget proposal. We'll talk about the three elements of the personnel budget tonight. Compensation, which of course is the biggest swath of the budget, and but also we will also talk about benefits and employee recognition. The different items or lines or accounts that make up the details of the personnel budget, you can see those on this slide. The first one being the benefits eligible FTE allowance. As a refresher, as we go through this presentation, some terminology, I'll give a quick definition for it, but if I miss something and you have a question, feel free to interrupt me and ask. I'm fine with that. An FTE is a full-time equivalent. When we're talking about this particular allowance, it may be one full-time employee or two half-time employees. When we talk about part-time staff, it may be a combination of part-time employees, and we look at how many labor hours those folks actually work and divide it by 2,080 hours per year to come up with what an FTE is when we look at that particular budget. We'll look at the total salary budget for benefits eligible staff, the total wage budget for allowance for part-time staff, mandatory payroll expenses, the cost of benefits, and employee recognition expenses. Slide. Just as a refresher, to remind the folks on this committee and those listening that we do have 3 categories of employees. And that matters as we, because we budget for them a little bit differently. We have full-time employees. They work at least 40 hours a week and are benefits eligible. They receive subsidized health, dental, and vision insurance benefits, as well as life and disability insurance, lockers retirement, paid time off. They have access to voluntary insurance programs like AFLAC and Legal Shield, access to participate in the 457B retirement savings plan, and our mental health and work-life harmony support program, employee assistance program. Half-time employees work exactly 20 hours a week. They're also benefits eligible. They have access to most of what full-time employees have access to, except for they can participate in health, dental, and vision insurance at an unsubsidized rate. So if they want to participate, then they pay the premium for those programs themselves via payroll deduction. Part-time employees are limited to 950 hours per year and are not considered to be benefits eligible, although they do have access to paid bereavement leave. They are able to participate in the 457B retirement savings plan and our employee assistance program. So the first thing that we want to talk about, and I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this topic, and that's the FTE allowance for benefits eligible staff. When we present the budget and we ask the board each year to review our proposal, part of what the board is approving is a capped number of benefits eligible FTEs that we are allowed to use for positions across the library system. In 2019, we started talking about ongoing capacity evaluation during the budgeting process. What that has meant over this period of time, if you look from what you see here are the FTE allowances from 2019 to present, is that we do evaluate every position that's vacated for ongoing need, as well as looking at opportunities to adjust our organizational structure and processes so that we can continue to provide the innovative library services that our community needs and expects from us. Since 2019, you'll be able to see here that we have added just 7 FTEs, benefits eligible FTEs over that period of time. And in that period of time, we have added new branches. We've opened the Culinary Center at Green Hills to bang up reception that includes, full programs and full waiting lists. We've added passport and notary services, and we've significantly expanded meeting spaces that are open for the public. We added quite a few positions. You can see those under in 19 and 20 in the branches. Some of the positions that were added that year were paid for by trading off some money that would have been allocated for part-time staff in those locations. Most of the other positions in collections, customer experience, delivery, electronic resources, fundraising, HR, library systems and reader services were single positions, and some adjustments were made to create new departments. And that's where you see some of the reduction in marketing. We also did a reorganization of youth services that year that saw us Reading Rocket become its own business unit due to the success of that program. In 2021, we were writing our budget right at the beginning of COVID. And we just added 1.5 FTEs, 1 FTE in the collection department, and netted an additional FTE, half of an FTE for the branches. one of the things that you'll see a handful of times in the reduced portion of this slide across the years is we evaluate when the branch custodians that we have on staff vacate their positions. We do use a contract custodial service to really good success across the library system, but not every building. Some buildings have greater needs, and so we do have some custodians still on staff. So when those positions are vacated, we take the opportunity to determine whether we need to fill that or whether that work can shift to the contract service in for a more economical result for the library. In 21-22, we did add 6.5 FTE, mostly to plan for and accommodate the opening the first year that all 3 Lee Summit branches were going to be open. We had shifted staff as the branches were rebuilt and remodeled. And so we added those FTEs to staff East Lee Summit. We also reorganized the electronic resources department that year to create digital learning, which is now organizational learning, as well as expand staff in library systems, which is the department that manages our circulation software and our website, among other things. Since 2022 and the 2022-2023 budget, all the way through the one that we're proposing, our number of our cap on the benefits eligible FTE allowance is at 417.5. We are not asking for additional FTEs this year, but as Aaron noted in his budget priority presentation, we have done a lot of reorganization and shifting in order to do and take care of some of the things that definitely need to be taken care of, as well as addressing the expanding services. So over that course of time, without adding FTEs to our cap, we are currently hiring for and are staffing East Independence. We added and are staffing and increasing staffing at the Culinary Center. We have did a reorganization that involved staff from executive operations, community relations and planning, and organizational learning to create our new digital innovation department and our new organizational communications department. We've expanded finance. We've greatly expanded our security department. And you can see some of the areas that we reduced staff in order to make some of these, in many cases, very critical changes and staffing additions in other areas that needed to be made. As we move into 24-25, we expect to add staff to executive operations, finance, HR, and IT, as well as potentially adding staff for a digital strategic initiative. I'm gonna let Aaron talk about that briefly. We'll see it on the numbers when we get there.
So thanks, Jennifer. This position is the beginning of a department which will be built out over the coming years. But the emphasis there will be the digitization of local resources, digital storytelling, and creating a more robust online offering of resources that come through that department. To do that work, we'll need to make an initial investment in probably a consultant to help us think about what a strategy for that department would look like, and a leadership position, a manager position that can help guide and create that department in the coming years.
Does anybody have any questions while we're on this slide before we move forward about this particular information? Okay, we can go to the next one. The biggest swath of the budget, of course, is for compensation, and I want to speak a little bit about how we structure compensation and how we come up with those budget numbers. If you recall, last year we completed and implemented a large-scale market compensation study we completely overhauled all of the job descriptions for every position in our organization. We worked with a consultant to take the information for those job descriptions and obtain market compensation data for 70 of our job titles. This data comes from resources that are that have pull data from the public and private sector, depending on the roles. It pulls data from employers all over, all over the country, but we focus on our region and in some cases our metro area, depending on what positions we are looking at. And it's and when we do these compensation studies, they don't show up in their databases unless they have multiple sources for compensation data. So we never use, and the data that we use, they don't come from single employers, single entities, anything like that. It's all aggregate data because that's the best way, to look at it. Once we have that data, we work with them and also internally, HR, some members of the HR team, and then extensively with the senior leadership team. We build a wage and salary structure that slots every position in the system save for library pages. We'll talk about that later, but on a grade with a midpoint of the pay range where each position is slotted and considers this market compensation data that we have obtained, as well as, our organizational structure and the details of how that position works at MCPL. We consider the skills and experience required, the scope of the work, so if it's system-wide or narrow focused, and responsibility, as well as the potential impact of the mistakes of a position. If a person in a position were to make mistakes, what is the risk, the professional risk that person is taking on in that position? All of those are considered when we are slotting positions into a wage structure. And you can see a summary of that wage structure in that supplemental data packet if you do want to look at that. Once the wage structure is constructed and all the positions are slotted into it, we do a range analysis of current incumbents. So current employees, we look at their total tenure with MCPL, their time in the current position that they're in, that they're being, that's being slotted, and look at where they should be on their pay range based on that data and information. In March of 2023, we did a partial implementation. Budgetary wise, it is difficult to, move everybody on their pay range. As far as an analysis like that might say that they should go, but we always elect to make as much progress as possible. And we did, and we talked about this last year. We did focus on making strides in compensation for those jobs that are graded on the lower grades, like grades 1 through 5. So predominantly made a lot of progress for entry level positions and entry level staff. That's where the labor market is the tightest, where we have a really high, there's a competitive labor market, and where we needed to see some progress, and we saw that there. And then we look at all kinds of data for benchmarking when we do a study like this, of course, but also as we move forward, how we make decisions when it's not a year, when we do a complete study and overhaul of our entire compensation and wage structure. So in the next slide. Yeah.
Jennifer, before you go on, can someone let me in?
Yeah,
Thank you.
of course. Yeah. Okay. Go to the next slide. Some of the things that we look at externally, are different.
I got the
Oh.
trying to get out of here.
She's. Are,
Let me give me a second.
yeah.
Sorry. Okay.
Um,
Oh, just come right out. Sisters.
Technology's working too good.
It's keeping me connected.
It says you're connected forever.
There we go.
Or I can disconnect you. Excellent. So these are some of the economic indicators that we look at that come from some external forces that are important for us to pay attention to when we are determining how we do compensation at the library. The first one being minimum wage increases in Missouri. Their minimum wage has an indexing factor now. We expect to see it above $13 an hour for 1/1 of 25, but it could move up more, possibly to being at $15 an hour by 1/1 of 26, maybe sooner, because there is some legislation out there that's going back and forth. This impacts the bottom end of our wage structure, and particularly our library pages, circulation aids, and driving those frontline staff, the wages for those frontline staff members. We also look at inflation markers in order for someone's pay increase to make a difference in acknowledging their increase in tenure and experience. We have to try to consider the kinds of things that they use to judge inflation, like consumer price index. This year, the CPI has increased from March of 23 to March of 24. It's increased by 3.5%, and so that is one of the markers that we would look at. We do look at market compensation trends. In addition to doing a massive market compensation study, periodically every 5 to 7 years or so, somewhere in there. We do price jobs individually as we create new positions. We go and get aggregate compensation data so that we're not just guessing about what a job, would take to fill a job to be at a fair and competitive pay rate. We get that data information, but we also look at things like because we deliver library service in a retail kind of model, we do compete for workers with retail, restaurant and hospitality to provide customer service in just with a different product in a different way in our libraries. And we know that the internal minimum wage for other employers is up 13% since 2022, and that the median internal minimum wage for workers is up to $16.70 an hour from $15.30 an hour in 2022. So there's quite a bit of movement at that end of the pay spectrum. And other factors come into play when we're, external factors of what's happening in the workforce, change-wise, that we are competing with, things like flexibility in a remote work and things that have to do with compliance. So when rules, regulations, and laws change, the one that we have just made a recent change about is the change to the minimum salary threshold for an employee to be able to be exempt from overtime. And we've been waiting for the actual rule regulation to drop, which happened today. But we did go ahead and make the change in anticipation that we knew it was coming, and so that impacted some staff members and how they're compensated. So that's just an example of the kinds of things that we look at externally when we are determining how we're doing and if we're following and not getting behind on best practices and staying with where the market is headed. And on the next slide, we can talk about some of the things that we look at internally when we are reviewing compensation. So entry level staff wages, we did prioritize that group in the previous couple of years' budgets and continue to do that. So at this point, starting wages for entry-level staff in the branches, this is not library pages. Library pages have a very narrow scope and focus of taking care of the shelves of materials. They mostly read shelf materials. They also do shelf reading, and they are not required to have extensive technical skills or know how to do a lot of the additional customer service duties that many of our other branch staff are meant to provide. They all make, at this point, $14 an hour. Library pages too is where they're at. But our associates in the branches, our customer service associate ones, who are the grade 1 entry level in the branches, their starting pay is now at $16.50 an hour versus $13.71 an hour in the 2021-2022 budget. And the average hourly wage for our entry-level staff across the system that are benefits eligible, so your full and half-time associates in the branches, our processors and in technical services and interlibrary loan, and our drivers and sorters on the dock, their average wage has increased from $17.15 in 21-22 to $20.70 now. So we've made really good progress, and it shows in our turnover and in our ability to recruit and have really robust competitive applicant pools for our open positions in these areas, and we've appreciated the board support as we've done some of that really critical work. Professional staff salaries, historically, we, as well as lots of public libraries, I think, we know that we tend to leverage the skill sets, the work ethic, the willingness to learn, the aptitude for learning that existing library staff have to cover a lot of the specialized needs of an organization for a library. The folks in the room and not in the room that have been to library school can attest to the slim volume of education that's provided for librarians when they go to library school that is related to budgeting and HR and IT and facilities. It's very minimal. However, they do tend to step up, and that's how a lot of staffing and things that takes place in a lot of library systems, including ours. But in order to provide, if we want to be excellent stewards and take really good care of the resources that are entrusted to us by our community, we have recruited people and will continue to recruit people who have education and experience, expertise in various specialties, so that librarians are librarianing, library workers are providing library services, and we're providing really good, excellent expertise to support them in, whether it's human resources, IT, finance, public relations and communications, just to name a few, that we are taking good care, and that in those areas, one of the things that, costs additional funds is that we are making sure that we have, an appropriate deep enough bench so that we have necessary backup in order to mitigate risk, so that we don't have just one person that is doing that's taking care of a large swath of resources or information or a huge critical function for the library system. Not because they can't do it, not because they can't manage it, but because it is an unwise path for an organization of our size with the amount of resources that we have available. That we need to be taking care of them. And part of the way to do that is to make sure for succession planning, for emergency planning, for all of those things that we are doing that. So recruiting staff that have specialized skills, rather than, teaching someone some of the things that we need them to know, even though that's not necessarily where they started, that tends to cost additional funds. When we look at some of the benchmarking for how we spend the compensation budget, we look at things like the percentage of the budget that we spend on certain categories of staff. So for the executive, the senior leadership staff, since 2016, 2017, we've bounced around right between 5% and 6% of the total budget being spent on senior leadership staff. But in 2016, we spent 5.04% on that group. And in 24-25, we're projected to spend 5.06%. So it's just 0.02% of a difference that stayed really consistent over time. We've seen a little bit of a shift post-COVID with a little more of the percentage of budget, less than 2% of a swing on managers, like department managers and function managers at HQ, versus what is the total budget is being spent on branch staff. But we are seeing that actually come back up as programming has been, we saw, quite a bit of a dip during COVID. And then as we've restarted programming, but we're also revamping it, delivering it in a different way. But we are seeing that come back up, and I would expect to see probably more of a recovery there, where those percentages will start to look again like they've always looked at, percentage of allocation of total dollars. We do look at take opportunities periodically throughout the year to look at internal equity. We want to make sure that similarly situated staff members don't have anything arbitrary that's causing a difference in their pay because something impacted them in a way that isn't directly attributable to their tenure, their time in their job, performance, whatever path that is. And so that's definitely important and definitely important work that we always will continue to do. And what it costs to provide to upgrade folks' skills, whether they're current employees or whether we need to go and look for skill sets that we're missing. And that that's other ways that we have to address compensation with internal data. Okay, now we get to the part where we just look at numbers. So you have like I said, you've got the personnel budget in front of you, either in board docs or here physically for us folks that are in the room. The top line on that budget is for the account 5010, which is labeled as personnel full-time. It doesn't include half-time, but it is the benefits eligible benefits eligible pay line. You can see some historical data on the budget sheet, the worksheet that we have for you now, including the budget and projection for the current fiscal year that we're in. For 24-25, that line, the way that how we got to that number is we looked at the projected salaries of the positions that are currently authorized to be at around $23,500,000. Make an adjustment of around 2% around that for turnover or time to fill. We know that that those positions won't be full all year long. Some people will come, some people will go. And so we make an adjustment there to allow for that. We have included an allowance for potentially doing pay increases in the fourth quarter of the fiscal year. That's when we do that evaluation, so that we are looking at our current fiscal year's budgeted funds. Considering all of the data that we've just reviewed that we look at, as well as looking into the next year and beyond budgeted funds to see what kind of pay increases are fair and sustainable and affordable. So all of those things come into play, but we've included that allowance there, as well as in the strategic initiatives column, an allowance for the digital strategy initiative that Aaron was talking about earlier. The total proposal in that line is $23,440,000, which is a 7.15% increase over the 23-24 budget or projection. And what we're looking at for an actual spend, which we expect to be pretty close to what we budgeted. Any questions about that line? This point. Okay, next slide. The next line is account 5011, and that's our part-time staffing allowance. How we look at that is we look at labor hours to spend across the system. The customer experience department works really hard to allocate those hours and works with branch managers to budget those out for the year. We're looking at using about 221,600 labor hours for branch associates. So about 106.5 FTEs total, for a total of $4,150,000. A little over 55,000 page hours, which is a little more than 26.5 FTEs, for a total of $785,000. About 2,000 delivery services hours, which is the equivalent of about 1 FTE, for $35,000, for a total on that line of $4,970,000. This is an 8.99% increase over the 23-24 budget projected. And I would like to point out on this slide is that increase is not just about increase to pay. This is going to be the first year that we have every location open and running, where we're not covering staff, using the staff from a closed location to cover staff at an open location while that location's being rebuilt or remodeled. East Independence is about to be open. So those are all, that's all layered on additional people that are needed to staff those locations. Do you have any questions about this line? So, all right, we can move forward. Of course, sort of. There are a couple of lines there for mandatory payroll expenses that we have to pay when we pay folks, including Social Security and Medicare tax. And unemployment, that line is, as you note, is pretty low. We are, as a public entity in Missouri, able to be self-insured for unemployment, which we elect to do. So we only pay actual expenses and not for unemployment insurance. We rarely are doing a reduction in force or laying people off. So, which is, often what unemployment is for. But we do have some expenses there. The way unemployment is calculated, where we often see an expense there is if we have part-time staff members who have a primary job and maybe become unemployed in their primary job, then we may, even if they are working for us, we will get credit for the pay that we pay them for their work. We may actually have to cover a small amount, usually a very fractional amount of their unemployment, which is considered to be underemployment payment. That's often where we're spending that money at. So we historically, that stays pretty low. We can go to the next slide. The next lines are for benefits expenses. So $30,000 for tuition reimbursement. Employees who meet the criteria of the program are able to apply for a 50% tuition reimbursement if they are pursuing their Master's of Library Science or another degree or certificate that's relevant to the position that they work in for the library. And that's the budget line set aside for that. The loggers retirement budget line is $3,842,000. For this year, it is an 8.99% increase. Part of that increase is due to the increase in compensation in salaries and wages for benefits eligible staff. And part of that increase is there's a slight increase in the required contribution rate from loggers. Last fiscal year, the rate was 16.8%, and the rate for the upcoming fiscal year is 17.1%. The next line is medical insurance, but it also does include dental and vision, which is a slight increase, 172,000 over last year. We do expect to go out to market for that for 1/1 of 25. So we typically see a little bit of an increase, but we may be able to mitigate that by going shopping. And we will, definitely look for the right provider for those things for the upcoming plan year. Life and disability insurance, that will also be going out to market for 1/1 of 25. We do have claims activity on the disability side that has an uptick. And so because those premium rates are based on salaries and wages, we see a little bit of an uptick there, and I do expect to see an uptick in the premium rate as well. But hopefully we'll be able to mitigate that by shopping. And then health insurance, we're going to talk about on the next slide. We're looking at funding it at 4.4 million. I did include on here just to bring to everyone's attention and speak about some other expenses that typically have been included in the personnel and benefits budget line that have to do with professional services that we engage to do everything from employee assistance, background checks, and investment advisory for the 457 plan, as well as expenses for training, are being moved to the operating side of the budget to the appropriate accounts, so that we are following some best accounting practices. So those things align with the money that we spend in those accounts and what we're spending that money on. So they're not included in the personnel budget this year, but look for those items to be in the full operating budget when that comes out. The next slide is just a quick snapshot of that internal health insurance fund. This is the time of the year we are budgeting to decide what we are going to contribute from the budget into that fund. In board docs, there is an expanded version of what's on the screen here that includes some historical information back to fiscal year 2021. This slide just contains the current the projection for the current year, as well as the projection for the upcoming year. We expect to come out a little bit ahead of what we projected for this year, primarily based on the adjustment that we made on 1/1/24 to that deductible level within the stop loss insurance, which is decreasing our stop loss premiums. We have seen an uptick in claims in September, so we are seeing the charges for that, and we did use projections that were updated by Lockton in March, so that we have those numbers are part of what's considered for what we would need for the upcoming year. So we are at the amount that we're asking to fund health insurance from last year versus this year is about $300,000. And based on those projections for that funding, as well as the projections from Lockton for how we will spend that money, we expect to end up with an ending net position of around $966,000. How we decide, the board passed a policy in 2019 to help guide them in determining that we have the right amount of money in the health insurance fund. The minimum for that is calculated using 3 months of average claims from the previous plan year, plus an amount called IBNR, or incurred but not received. The hidden claims, the ones we don't know about yet that we would still have to pay. And by adding those those two things together, we get what the minimum net position should be. And we don't have a full calculation for that for this upcoming year, because we'll get that updated IBNR exhibit and from Lockton in June to go. It goes along with the audit when it's performed. And so we will have that, but based on our estimates, the minimum net position for the upcoming year should be 940,000. And the maximum should be 2 million, and we'll be bumping up against that minimum according to these projections. But we will, part of the benefit of having a plan year for the health plan being calendar year is that we can look at health plan design and how and contributions and all of those things to make sure that we are reacting to any kind of changes in how the health plan is being used, and making sure that we're using all the tools, all the levers available to us to mitigate health expenses for us and for staff. Yeah, that's it. And the last thing just to talk about is employee recognition. We do have a program, a well-established program here at the library called Exceptionality. It's where we pay for things like rewarding milestone tenure awards, different programs that we have, like our mentoring program, we do some financial wellness and education programs. For example, we have a program called Explore Your Future, which is for folks that are, 10 or 15 years away from retirement. It's a holistic program to look at all of the things that go with retiring, not just your finances, but also what are you going to do with yourself and how do you plan for all of those things. As well as we provided, this year we were able to use the money that in this fund to provide education, some education programs and for financial planning for staff, as we went from being paid once a month to being paid bi-weekly to help them plan and budget for those things that was paid for out of this fund. We use it to buy snacks for meetings. I believe it's tomorrow Take Your Kid to Work Day. I think it's tomorrow. Tomorrow's Take Your Kid to Work Day. And so we'll have some activities and fun things for those kiddos to see what we do at the library, what their parents and grandparents do at the library. And that's the kind of thing that we pay for out of these funds. And that budget line is in 5110 and is $88,000 for this upcoming fiscal year.
Thank you, Jim.
That's what I got.
We have a question from Ron.
Yes.
What chair?
Because it asked me if I had a question for him. I was like, oh, no.
I wonder if you could help me or clarify this. If I understand correctly, the person's employees' initial thoughts on compensation are from the aggregate data. But if you find someone that's just really excelling in his or her position, you go to the range analysis where you can kind of bump them up in their.
We tend to not do that. We for a while we were tying pay to performance evaluation scores, but we've gotten away from that because what happens looks like it happens over time is there's a lot of inconsistency across the library system, where you might have a manager who grades everybody high and great and not so much. So we use other means of engaging about performance and development and training. And what we've done over time instead is we've built some opportunity for advancement within our system, where previously we had one level of staff in our branches. So like we had just one level of frontline associate. Whereas now we have two levels of customer service associates with additional responsibilities and pay that go with that, as well as another level of specialty associates. So when you go into the branches, you'll find early literacy associates that are specialty trained and compensated to do story time and in the way that we train them to do that here at the library. Technology associates that help with tech help, youth services associates, programming associates. And what we're going to see this year too is we've added another level in the branches for customer in some branches that we're piloting of customer service supervisors, so that we have a customer service expert on available in those hours when managers may not be available. And so it's a more opportunity for investment. So those folks that are performing outstanding, we hope to always be creating opportunities for them to do more and better things without just having to say, well, we'll give this person more money at the level that they're at, that we would provide opportunities for them to grow and develop
Great.
in other ways.
Ask you another question.
Uh-huh.
Okay. I understand that our friends at the Department of Labor promulgated administrative regulations regarding premium pay or overtime compensation for heretofore exempt people. So if I'm understanding, we're adjusting the base compensation so we can avoid triggering all that work. Is that it? Or?
We actually didn't. We elected to scale back the number of employees that we have as exempt. So we converted a number of staff from being exempt to being non-exempt. So they're now eligible for overtime if they work more than 40 hours. But what we found when we started trying to determine what our best course of action was here is that many of them aren't working more than 40 hours. And so it's more beneficial to periodically compensate them for when they do work more than 40 than it is to bump a whole group of people really above what where the market says that group should be.
Okay. Yeah.
And just revert them back to non-exempt. So that's the direction that we chose to go.
Okay. Yeah. Because when I first heard of this, I just envisioned it just a flood of additional time cards and all that kind of stuff. So
We are in the process of switching to a new we just finished our first payroll with our new timekeeping system. It's within the one that we've used, but they pushed us to their updated product. And so we're adjusting to that kind of at the same time. But in that case, in that piece of it, we're doing our best. But most of the people that were impacted by those changes have been with us for a while, and I trust that they will adjust. And again, if they do work more than 40, then we will compensate them for that. But that's the direction that we chose to go in terms of the most balanced path forward for staff and for the library.
It should be noted also that the overtime expenses are tracked and reported.
Yes.
And so there's some areas, or one area in particular, where we ask for estimates, primarily facilities. And that overtime use is dependent on weather conditions and other factors.
Yeah. And so we'll be keeping an eye on that. And it's, we don't really want anybody working a lot of overtime anyway, regardless. And that was the best, with all of the conversations that we had, the best course of action for moving forward to accommodate those new regulations. Because what it looks like is that the dollar amount that was floated out there before the final regs were issued is actually a little bit lower than what they have landed on. But they're doing a two-tier approach. So there'll be an amount that goes into effect in July, and then a much greater amount that goes into effect in January. But we're ready ahead of time, so.
just another question, if I may. I noticed a few months or meetings ago, there's some question about some of the outside services that your department gets, and are you basically satisfied with what you get?
Yeah, I mean, we use consultants for, different things. I think pretty much every segment of our business does. We've been fortunate in our relationship with Lockton. We did a full, where we evaluated 19 brokerage firms in order before we chose Lockton. We had been with CBIZ prior to that for greater than 20 years. and Lockton has done a fantastic job for us in, they're the ones who assisted us in moving to the partially self-funded model that has enabled us to stabilize healthcare expenses for the library. It has proved to be a truly stabilizing force, and they're reactive in terms of customer service, and they provided us with excellent. We are able to leverage their size, even though we're smaller in terms of their clients, working with them and them accepting the flat rate compensation model, which is unusual in their business. They're not, the bulk of their compensation is not based on us paying more premium. That's to have that relationship with them, and then for them to provide us with such excellent support and services for not just health insurance, but for all of our benefits and everything from, providing the projections and the actuarial support that we need to run this fund to, to resolving, customer service issues with our, with our other insurance providers and things as well. So yes, I've been incredibly satisfied with that good working relationship and the work output.
Thank you.
I'd like to move to questions for those who are online. So that would be Michelle, Noel, and Yemi, and Dr. Pandolfi.
Michelle's
Michelle's not, Michelle's phone.
I don't have any, but thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I don't have any. I really appreciate the presentation and the slides, I think you did a great job putting it together. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have one question that might seem like left field.
Great.
But you know me. What is not in this budget that might have been a wish list, was pushed to the future, or something that was decided against? Just curious.
I think that we did a better job of putting this budget together in terms of that this time. I mean, we really did look at but we are holding off, as always, but it's not just about this budget. I mean, it's also about the rest of the operating budget. So when you look at where we might need some additional support, operational support, but we don't have a place to put those folks. So some of those things we're limited by not just what we're looking for in the personnel budget, but just overall, there are other limitations there. But we know that we have, particularly in technology, we're just going to continue to need to upskill and look for folks, and also not just for taking care of the price of admission things that we need for the library, and Erin can speak more to that too if you want, but also the things that the public is going to expect us to help to educate them on, and the services that they're going to expect us to provide. So
If I could just add here, so
Yeah.
there's some significant changes coming into the way we manage public space. And we don't know what the effect of that will be on branch staffing. So we'll evaluate it as it happens, but there may be a demand for additional staff in high trafficked areas. The digitization efforts also is one where I don't think it's prudent to budget for a full staff without first getting the direction of a subject matter expert.
Yeah.
Which is why we dialed that back.
And the customer service supervisor piloting that we're starting, where we're converting current FTEs as they're vacated to piloting this, is in a way we're looking at ways to address. There is no way to overstate how the public is using the expanded access to meeting rooms and additional support that our staff need to be. Either we need more staff or additional training for staff to help provide things like technical support, but also just the physical support for the meeting rooms themselves. I mean, if you go and talk to staff that work in our biggest, busiest branches with meeting rooms, they will tell you, like on Saturdays, the turnover of rooms that are reserved and the setup of those rooms, just the physical bit of that, and then helping with the types of technologies and things that folks use in those meeting rooms. So our staff, and we know this over time, are infinitely creative in figuring out how to do more with less. It's in them. It's what they do. But we're kind of at a critical point here where we're this year is going to definitely be a learning year when we have all of our locations open. They're all operating, functioning with these new spaces, and really hearing from the public and our staff about what is working and what isn't.
So basically, you're benchmarking and analysis and just
Absolutely,
watching.
as always, yeah, but definitely as we look at just.
One other area, and Jeremy, you can chime in. There's room within the finance budget right now. We're holding off. However, I'm recommending a complete overhaul of our financial system. And to do that, to modernize that department, there may be a need for additional staff. One, to help with the migration, but then two, to assist with the sword services once we make that migration. So as I've said before in board meetings, the library district that I worked in prior to coming to Mid-Continent had a payroll and finance department that included legal roughly the size of 14, give or take. And here we're at 4. And I think it's a worthwhile investment because you're handling taxpayer dollars. But to do things the way they should be done, additional steps.
Thank you. And I had one other question. We're coming out of COVID, but is there room in this budget for any crisis or disaster response that may be, because the library is a partner with FEMA and several other agencies in helping to help communities heal and recover. So I'm not sure if there's deliberate room, I should say, in the budget for crisis response.
I don't think that we've deliberately included it, but what I would say about it in terms of what we've learned is that we know for sure, because at the time we were doing it, we were on the fly, right?
Yeah.
But I will never.
And at the end of the fiscal year.
I will never stop marveling at how agile our staff was during that time, to shifting to, how they deliver services and what services we deliver, what we provided for the community. And I think that they would do it again, and we would probably be a little better at it. A little, and be able to be everything that we were to the community during that time. But in a way that, with an understanding of, I would say, remaining agile, but with less reactionary and more, more of an understanding of, we could take a deep breath and slow down and make decisions a little bit more deliberately and slowly, so that not every single shift in what was going on is a crisis that we we don't want to escalate that. But I think we would be ready just because we got really good at figuring out what to stop and what to start.
This system did a really good
during
job because many libraries closed down.
Yeah.
To keep services and keep programming going.
Again, I will always marvel when I look back at it and also feel a little. Yes, from it. It was pretty intense, but also knowing that, it was. I know how good they are at it and how good our chops are now.
Yeah.
At being able to deal with it. Dion, who is on my team, would remind our team of that often. This is like exercise for our HR skills. And that's the same for our library skills and all facility skills and all the things that we had to get better at during that time. So
Thank you. Excellent presentation.
yeah.
At this time, I would ask, what do you need? Oh, yes.
I just want to make a comment or an observation. preface it with the fact that I am a CPA. We had your columns of numbers counting from historical costs and the finance of future costs. And it's very disciplined, but visually what really has such a, I think, profound impact is that what accounting and finance cannot do is determine value. I think that's more whatever, but I think whatever that is, it came across so wonderfully by the visual aspect. If you got the what's done, and not knocking the buildings, but they're nice, but they're empty and cold. It's until you get the stuff that you guys do and personnel that really gives any life to it. So maybe piggybacking on what Joycelyn mentioned, if there are things that are reasonably anticipated, I would hope you wouldn't be too pretty much the break on that. Yeah, it's your call, you guys, the professionals, but I mean, just my opinion on that.
Absolutely. I think I mean, I think that's the partnership that we're asking the board, the partner that we're asking the board to be, we want to, we want to all move forward. We want to do it with good stewardship and responsibility, but also being able to dream big and be able to understand how many, and you can see them here in, just a handful of them in this presentation, but how many creative and staff members who have a passion for delivering new, different, and exciting things for folks in our branches, and that's a partnership that we all have to determine what we want to do next and what that's going to look like together.
Yeah, and something you mentioned exciting. Some of the stuff to me is incredibly unexciting, but essential. Like on YouTube, a week and a half ago, one of the local people in the corporate fiduciary community gave a talk on powers of attorney.
Yeah,
Absolutely essential stuff for everybody to have.
Absolutely.
It's not exciting, but again, it's essential stuff. Where else would you get it unless
Yeah.
you spend $200 to go to an office? And there it was right there, and it was remarkably well done.
Yeah.
And for free.
yeah. And that's the kind of thing, the kind of things that we want to continue to do and even expand them. I mean, you brought up having the outrage machine author, and providing that kind of information and support for our communities. So, I mean, we want to continue to do those things. I know Aaron has lots of ideas and, and working with staff on lots of ideas. But everything is still boils down to a guns and butter balancing act and determining what those priorities are.
I should cite that Jennifer's budget and all of our budgets that SLT put together, but Jennifer's in particular demonstrates our values as an organization. It's an investment in people. And you're right, you can't assign a value, to everything, to wellness, a numeric value. But there is an economic value to the region, to paying a livable wage. It's dollars back into our local economy. The importance of that can't be understated. So, and then just lastly, in regards to the needs for the future, this budget was designed in a way that we're thinking about the next 3 to 5 or even further past that. And it's a roadmap of sorts. We understand that there will be unforeseen events. Maybe, inflation will go up or down, but nonetheless, now we have a guide to take us through the next 10 years. It takes into account maintenance needs and staffing. So great work, Jennifer.
Great
Yeah.
work. Any other questions online? What do you need for us on this? What's the next step for, if you would explain the next step for this budget?
Given the amount of information that's been presented to you, I think it's perfectly all right to spend a little bit of time with it. And then we'll reconvene on, I think, May 8th, if I'm not mistaken.
Mhm.
And at that time, you can vote, hopefully, to pass it along to the full board for consideration.
Okay,
And that will be consistent with the IT committee's
Since it's well.
Thank you. Okay, next on the agenda, do we have any visitors' comments?
No, we did not.
Hey, do we have any new business?
Not on my end.
Not on mine either. And so the ever popular, I'll take a motion to adjourn. Okay. A second,
Second, this is yummy.
and we could do a full acclamation. All those in favor?
Hi.
Please say aye. Aye.
Aye, aye, aye.